Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Thanks for joining us in this episode of BRM Brownbag. I'm your host, Suresh GP, and we are in episode number 34. Today, we have esteemed guests with us, Tommy Kile, who's recently been announced as the top 2025 BRM. And he's a technology business partner, technology business relationship manager at Akamai. And we are so excited to have him because he's also leading a lot of initiative within the BRM community. So he's going to come today and share with us his experience in two of the episodes, where he's going to bring in that element of his journey within the business relationship management space and how has it evolved in the last 2 years, and also how much he has learned in terms of the community and the value is received from the BRM single global BRM community. Thanks, Tommy, for joining us. How are you doing today? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you as well. It's Saturday actually where you are.
Good.
Thank you so much. It's a great day, and I'm honored to be here and talk a little bit about my BRM journey, but that of the communities I'm involved in as well as Akamai's.
Awesome. So we'll get started off in the journey of starting to understand the BRM organization. So tell us a little bit about your BRM organization. How is it being structured? From reporting perspective, how do you align to support the business at Akamai? How has been that structure, coming up, and how has been that journey?
Absolutely. Well, we're going on about 2 years formally having the program. It was part of a larger initiative where we engaged with Deloitte, one of the consultants, and really looked at ways to improve our IT operating model. So we took a huge survey, and much of the responses that we got back were really about around how IT and the business engages
Right.
and how well we get things done that led to positive business outcomes. This role was an outcome that came out of that. It was one of the top action items that the IT operating model team came away with.
Right.
I was fortunate enough to be selected as the first BRM at
Nice.
Akamai. So we call them IT business technology partners. We really have a great foundation built. Our CIO is our biggest fan, Kate Prouty. I couldn't say enough about how well that this is a part of her long-term vision for IT,
Right.
to better operate at that strategic level, to be that trusted partner, that person that they turn to when they need big things done. And
Right.
Akamai has a lot of big things going on, from a product perspective, as well as changing how we pivot more into the cloud and security space. So we're pretty proud of that. We're pretty proud that our business technology partners are a huge part of that.
Right.
It's evolving. It's not easy. It's definitely when you're building something brand new.
Right.
Change management, becomes one of the things you're working on, as well as how well do you work with your business partner, and how do you do this in a way that is not just meeting,
Right.
but actually meeting and delivering impact, that you
Yes.
add value to each of those conversations. So we're working on it. It's definitely not perfect yet, and we've learned some things along the way, but it's been a great journey so far.
Awesome. So one of the things we've always been struggling in the BRM world is about becoming more strategic partners. I mean, it's easy said than done. And you know it, like sometimes we don't have that mindset, we don't have that level of philosophy, and we still perceive like service providers. Oh, we have this work to be done. There's a cloud rollout that has to be done. There's a O365 rollout that has to be done. Let's get it done. So how do you ensure that BRMs are seen as more strategic partners? Because everybody can get into the trenches just to do the execution. Just taking a step back and looking at becoming strategic partners, how do you make that happen? I mean, sometimes it's like run on the wheel, just going on and doing the same things around. So how do you make sure that the business, and this is again a perception, right? Business relationship manager perceived like sometimes being order takers, just do what I ask you to do, otherwise just go out of my way. I'm kind of being brutal, but the reality is that until you make that perception very clear and based on your results and deliverables, you build that strategic partnering. It's very difficult. So how do you go about doing that?
I think the biggest thing is you mentioned delivery, and a lot of times we try to separate things into neat little buckets:
Right,
tactical, strategic, operational, order taker. We try to put things in neat little categories to make it fit a
right,
model.
right,
In my experience, I'm finding that you really got to kind of set those things aside
right,
and really work on a delivery.
right,
Delivery is your currency. If you're not delivering on the things that you're expected to deliver to begin with, they're
right.
not going to bring you in on bigger things or
Correct.
additional things. So
Right,
what I find is, first, forge that partnership with your IT partners, with the providers, right? And
right,
make sure you understand the business of IT
correct,
because that's important. You're representing an entire organization, in our case 700 plus strong
correct.
across the globe.
Right,
So we're engaging with a business partner. You better know your stuff,
correct.
and if you're going to help them, navigate the challenges, and that's one of the big ones, right? Just like, I don't know who to talk to, I don't know how to get these things done, or where do I
Right,
go when I have a problem. So I do think you have to start, in your own house first, and,
correct.
and make sure you're well versed. One of the challenges that I encountered first off was I grew up in a silo in IT.
Right,
I started in the PMO, then I worked in one of our IT leaders organizations as a BRM in what we call back office applications. So it's like ERP and supply chain and
correct.
those types of applications. And as the BRM role really expanded, I began to see that I needed to have a much broader exposure to the IT leaders in other parts of IT,
Correct.
their services they provide, the challenges, the business of IT, as I like to call it, and even building those relationships with those other IT leaders. So once you've kind of got that, I feel like the next logical step, and really there's some lessons learned here I'll hit on, is that you need to know what's important to the business.
Right,
And one of the things I observed really, quickly was they're not talking about IT.
right,
It's like, hey, what are they talking about? What's going on? And with your business partners. And I'm like, guys, honestly, they don't talk about us a whole lot. If
right,
there's a problem, they do,
right,
but for the most part, the table stakes are in place for delivering on the things that have been asked to. But they're talking about product. They're talking about things like increasing revenue or hitting gross margin targets.
correct.
So if you want to make an impact with your business, hide that tech. Don't show up and kind of put the tech right up front. I think you really have to focus on what are they working on,
Right,
and then how, if possible, if it's even needed, does technology help them get to those business outcomes?
correct.
So I think it's a really big, lesson learned, in BRM as a whole. When we're always searching for a meaning, right? We're searching
Right,
for, hey, I got to show my impact. Well, if you want to show your impact, start delivering on the things that's important,
correct,
to your business partner. And
correct.
whether it's enhancements to a sales process. Notice I started with process and not technology here.
Right,
It could be that, your smartest business systems analyst or your BRM who understands how things kind of work and fit together, spending time with the sales team or with the product team to understand how those things work, where their pain points are. That's how you can start to earn some trust. If you want to earn trust with people, A, deliver on what you said you're going to deliver. B, start like finding your way to the fires,
right,
find your way to the pain, and then, ask them, is this something you need me to solve?
correct.
Sometimes, it's not their highest priority to deal with the IT stuff. Their
Right.
highest priority might be, I need to train my sales team on how to market this new product better.
Absolutely.
Now, Salesforce and other applications may help enable that. The,
Correct.
the data products that we deliver, through our Tableau platform may help them be armed with the right information to do that. But honestly, if you want to make a difference, I honestly feel that the difference is deliver on what they're trying to deliver on.
No, that's a
And it's
very,
not about taking credit, it's about like, how do I help you? And not necessarily, hey, I have all this technology, figure out how to help you.
now you hit the nail on the head. And I think this is a part of the struggle because we in IT seem to be converting everything in terms of applications, infrastructure, middle tier. We don't really talk the language of the business. And that's a phenomenal problem because we are so ingrained within IT towards looking at these as components. We don't start to articulate what does business really think about. And you mentioned a part of it. All I care about is how is my sales numbers growing? What's the new product that I'm launching? And if you are not part of understanding in the value chain how we are going to enable our business partners to be successful, then you're going to miss the whole part. And we have this old metrics. That's what I call as watermelon metrics. Everything looks green outside. The moment I open the watermelon, it's bleeding red. So you just don't really get it right because you haven't really spent a lot of time with what the business really needs. And people ask us this one, why don't they tell us what is important? I said, they're not going to tell you what is important. You better go and understand and be in thick and thin of things and say that this is what I think is important, right? Because they don't have time to educate you and tell you what is needed for the business because they have other priorities in place. So it's a very important statement where people think that business doesn't tell us what they need. If only they told us, we would do that. Then you would not be here in business. You probably take the proactive steps to see and do the homework before you go through it. And you're absolutely right. And when you start to understand and put yourself more into the shoes of your business partner, you have a much broader understanding to shape and see how we can add value. Now, this stems up to a next question where every organization have got short-term operational needs, right? Douse the fire, keep things up and running with long-term strategic objectives. So as a BRM, how do we play that role between short-term, operational needs to long-term strategic objectives? How do it's like juggling around two different extremes. So how do you play that?
It's interesting you ask this question. If you look at some of the Gartner research, they will tell you there's percentages, right? So if you want to really geek out and get your pocket protector out, you could say, okay, for an organization that's growing, in such a way, you should have a certain percent of transform, run, and grow type initiatives. I find that people get caught up in semantics with that.
Right.
Really, I look at, some of the short-term things that you might do should be to enable business outcomes.
Right.
So, when it comes to like making something pretty, changing the text on a page or creating some new data element, those are small and those should be handled by your service delivery teams who should have bandwidth,
Right.
planned for, accomplishing, what we call agility type items. Like there's an opportunity, let's get it.
Right.
I do think you have to have a longer term view. And sometimes the BRM is the one that helps, really facilitate that.
Right.
It could be that, hey, we're struggling in this area. In order to get to this, business outcome, we need to unlock,
Right.
our team to be able to plan better. For instance, we have hundreds of thousands of servers around the world. It's a lot of CapEx.
Right.
So how well is our team able to predict where we might need traffic across our global network? Right. And then how do we procure servers in a way that doesn't keep a lot of inventory on the shelf, but right. at the same time enables us to be responsive? Those are the types of business problems that, right. That my business partners are facing. Okay. So when they come to us, instead of leading with, hey, we have an application that does this, or we have an application that does that, or hey, you should buy this new thing. Sometimes there are short-term things you have to do to like get them a little relief. Right. At the same time, it might be that you're on an aging platform that doesn't have a good path, and that your next move might say be to the cloud, correct. Or it might be to another application that has a longer lifespan left in it. Correct. And I think that's where BRMs add depth to those conversations, but we don't lead with it. Correct. And I think that's the key, right? I'm leading with what's your pain? Right. How long has that hurt? What right. have you tried? And then finally, what can I do first to help, get the team focused on the right things? Because right. when I bring that message back to IT, right. I have to translate that business outcome into something that our technology leaders can go and put some structure around and deliver on, whether it's a PMO, an application lead. It could be a brand new application or stack that we need to bring in because we have a gap somewhere. Right. And that's where I help them understand the process. So again, know the business of IT before you engage with your business partner, because there are ways that we get things done and you have to follow process. So understanding how that works and understand sort of the inputs and the outputs of those processes. You talked about value stream earlier. IT has their own value stream. Right. So it's ideation, intake, getting things done as far as projects and operations go. And then finally that value piece at the end that right. says like, hey, we did it. What did that, did we deliver what we intended to, for this business initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your BRM framework. You did tell about that within your organization, about 2 years by May that you will complete as a part of BRM program. So how much of input or guidance did you receive from the BRM Institute to roll out the program? I mean, you did your BRMP, you did your CBRM and stuff like that, I think. But how has that been the journey, like in terms of from a BRM Institute, BRM framework perspective? Of course, we have evolved as part of business relationship management professional itself, but how much of input and guidance did you receive when rolling out that program?
Yeah, I'll tell you, we had a really good engagement with Deloitte.
Hmm.
And how I came across the BRM Institute was I started to see footnotes where they referenced material from the Institute.
Right.
Uh, and consultants, they're really great at sort of that high level, and even they produced a series of slide decks and a lot of documents over the course of a pretty decently sized engagement.
Right.
What I found when I tried to operationalize it is BRM number one. My first role was, build a playbook. What are the
Right.
essential things as we build our practice and bring on other BRMs that we want to have standardized? Where's the best place to allow a bit of customization or personalization to fit that business partner, that IT partner's, way of working? And then finally, what are the art and the
Yeah.
science part of it?
Yeah.
We're pretty good at, like, the book knowledge, right? You can take your BRMP, you can do your CBRM, but really the application piece of how to make that work in your organization. So
Correct.
I did some pretty I stumbled a few times. I
Right.
took, kind of, it's funny because being a PM by trade, coming up, you never beat people over the head with the PMBOK,
Yeah.
right? You didn't
Yeah.
start reading page 67 and talk about stakeholder analysis. You
Yeah.
didn't do
Yeah. Yeah.
that. You
Yeah.
understood the concept, but you had to figure out how to apply it in
Correct.
your organization. So
Correct.
the BRM material, whether it's from the certification courses and even from the BRM book of knowledge, a lot of the stuff that's available in the campus really seeded me with enough, foundational knowledge beyond what the consultants delivered, which was great.
Right.
But I think what really did it was when I started to learn that I had to optimize it.
Right.
So that's a term inside Akamai where you could take some commercial product or some concept. You have to figure out how it works in your organization. And there's
Right.
not a book.
Correct.
You can start with that book, but that book is not going to be what, gets you to winning.
Right.
What gets you to winning is how you can get people in your organization to understand the intent of what you're doing
Right.
and not overly complicate it just for the sake of using certain words or a certain model,
Correct.
or heaven forbid you're getting a book out and reading it to them, because you're
Correct.
going to lose people pretty quick when you do that. So I would say, the key is learn those things, because you need the foundation of being a great BRM, and
Right.
you get those through certification, you get those through your knowledge providers. I
Correct.
can tell you, I have engaged with every knowledge provider that the BRM Institute has.
Sure.
And I've done that at different times for different reasons,
Right.
because everyone has a niche or a specialty or something that I felt like I needed
Sure.
specifically at that time. So
Sure.
I would encourage people, learn the book stuff, start to, figure out who's who in the BRM world and what are they doing? What do they know already that can help accelerate your journey?
Right.
And then finally, build those relationships, because you're going to get stuck. You're going to, like, try to apply it. You're going to fail. You're going to try again and fail. And then finally, you're going to get a little frustrated. And I hear
Right.
that from BRMs in my world that, hey, I've tried all these things and I can't seem to get people to, like, understand. I feel like I'm speaking another language to them. And it's like, well, perhaps you're speaking the wrong language.
Right.
You need to speak the language of the business. You need to speak the language of IT. Because if you show up with all this BRM book stuff, you kind of lose people, because,
Correct.
like, they're not where you are.
Correct.
You're attempting to bring them along for a journey.
Right.
So things like, I started with the relationship maturity model, for
Right.
instance, and I love it. The questions and a lot of the templates that I got from the Institute make perfect sense to me.
Right.
But when I tried to, like, send it out, for instance, or, put it in some sort of a electronic format, it lost a lot. It
Right.
lost the why. Why are
Correct.
we doing this? And people didn't like being put in buckets. What do you
Correct.
mean I'm an order taker? What do you
Correct.
mean I'm not a trusted, trusted partner or a strategic? And people use different words kind of interchangeably depending on who you're talking to. But I would encourage anyone that's struggling to really look in the mirror first
Right.
and say, what am I doing here that's contributing to some of this confusion?
Correct.
And then B, have a good network of BRMs. And it doesn't need to just be in your industry. I could tell you, I have BRM people that I talk to frequently across government, education, nonprofit. You need a good village to kind of surround yourself with,
Correct.
because many of us, you'll hear struggle for identity, struggle for impact.
Right.
And I think you hear it come up as like role conflict. I think a lot of times, if we're really clear about what it is we're trying to help someone else achieve, it's less about us. And
Sure.
it's more about, how can I help you? And some that might take that as an order taker, but I got to tell you, you got to start out like at order taker in some cases, or even
Yeah.
worse,
Yeah.
and build your way up. You build that like trust. You build that by earning that seat at the table. And then finally, it's not enough to have a seat. You need to have something of value. You need to add value in those engagements and have something to say.
Right.
And then finally, like, deliver. If your IT team or yourself are not delivering, it is very hard to move up that progression, from order taker to trusted partner. You're not going to get there because,
Yeah.
frankly, who trusts people that don't do what they said they were going to do? Who trusts
Yeah.
people that seem to be operating on their own agenda? I'm
Yeah.
getting IT things done, but I'm not achieving what the business needs. Did you really win?
Correct.
Is it enough to say, hey, I have a new ERP, but my business is handcuffed now because they don't have the flexibility they
Correct.
need, to achieve their business outcomes? So I do think that like we have to challenge ourselves as BRMs to really look in the mirror and ask, like, how do I add value? When's it appropriate to try to engage? And sometimes those things are referrals.
Right.
I call them handoffs. So you talked a little bit about how do you balance the operational piece. I think just like a good quarterback, for those that understand the football
Sure.
analogy, you
Sure.
need to know when to hand off. The BRM is not the single point of contact for the organization.
Sure.
The BRM should help folks navigate, should be orchestrating, should
Sure.
be, being a thought leader,
Correct.
connecting concepts and processes and systems, but also connecting people. Because it's not enough, to just know these things,
Correct.
but to actually do something to add value to what the business is achieving. And I say the business as a whole. A lot of us try to put the business in IT, for instance, in these two little buckets.
Right.
IT is the business. There's not a company in the world now
Sure.
that, is just operating analog. There's
Correct.
no stubby pencils and people with little notebooks somewhere writing everything down anymore. You may be
Absolutely.
doing that for your notes still, and hopefully you're not. But if you are, what you're doing is you're creating a silo. There's
Correct.
IT in the business. And I like to use a soccer analogy for that. When you ask the goalie what his objective is, what's your job? Some goalies will tell you to keep the other team from scoring. I disagree. Your job is to help the team win.
Right.
Is it enough to keep the team from scoring if you don't score
No.
enough? No,
No.
that's not winning. So I would tell you that, as a BRM, you have to help people understand that our job is not just taking tickets at the help desk. Our
Right.
job is not just, being change managers or project managers. It's to help the team, the company, win. You need to
That's
understand, how do you win? Where are we in what's the score? And then how do we get to where, the winning score is? It may look different at different points in your business's maturity, but I think if you do those things, then you don't have to worry about selling BRM anymore. They'll
wow.
ask for it. They won't even care what you call it.
Now, wow, that's really nuggets of wisdom packed into that particular thing, and thanks for that. So, a couple of questions on this part, and then we'll look into the next part. So, the executive sponsorship has been always a very important part for success of any BRM framework. So, how did you secure it, and how did you get that? You did mention about the CIO and getting them the part. So, how did it happen? Because a lot of people struggle because if the executive leadership is not convinced on looking at BRM as the right way to go forward to build partnerships and relationships across the entire spectrum, it's not going to work. So, how did you do that, and how did you secure that successfully?
Well, I think you have to be intentional.
Hmm.
You have to start being very intentional. Anyone whose title, has a CXO in it is a very busy person, and
Right.
their attention's on a lot of different things. And even in IT, your IT's, your CIO has many responsibilities, many
Correct.
different relationships. They're BRM number one, honestly.
Correct.
Kind of focus on that. What I would tell you is that that's just the beginning. It's enough to have someone, lend you their name that says like, hey, this is the CIO's top initiative. It's another to start delivering on it, because they're not going to be your fan forever. You
Right,
have to start showing impact. You have to start to make a difference somewhere in the organization,
right,
that CIO or COO, CEO, that they start to notice that, hey, when I have a BRM engaged, there's a different outcome. There's
right,
a different like level of sophistication,
right.
that we are focused on delivering the right things
Right.
versus trying to be everything to everyone.
Correct.
So I would tell you, the key to, having a sponsor is you've got to create some awareness around what BRM is and what it's
Right.
not.
Sure.
There's a lot of, noise that's out there.
Yeah.
If you talk to PMI, PMs are strategic. PMs should be helping understand business outcomes, and they do stakeholder analysis and they engage. And I'm not saying they don't, but I do think you have to figure out how to make those things work together, or it
Sure.
starts to begin to look like, well, aren't BRMs just PMs that don't have a project?
Right.
And it's like, okay, let me help you explain to you. The BRM is a big part of ideation process. The
Right.
BRM is a big part of like building those relationships and helping to build trust.
Right.
I am a partner with our PMO.
Right.
I am not doing the PMO's job. They
Right.
have plenty of expertise and knowledge and some really brilliant people who are great at doing what they do. At that point, I'm transitioning to be a stakeholder. I'm an interested party. I am very interested in the success of this project, and if it's going to deliver the value and the business outcome
Right.
that we promised to, deliver. So I would tell you that understanding how all those pieces fit together and being able to show where BRM made a difference. And notice I didn't say anything about fancy numbers and ROI calculators and some spreadsheet somewhere or some fancy glossy thing. If you really want to make an impact, your business partner should be telling stories to your CIO.
Right.
Like, I really appreciated how I had this one hand to shake in IT when the game was on the line, when we were doing our strategy for the year. This person was engaged. They understood what we were talking about.
Right.
They knew how to operationalize the things that we wanted to get accomplished.
Right.
And no kidding, they followed up. They ensured those commitments were being met. And when they weren't, they got in, rolled up their sleeves, figured out where the problems were. And next thing you knew, the fire was out and we were back on track.
Yeah.
That's what BRM should be doing: engaging, delivering value, finding where the pain is, put it out, and then help the team kind of rinse, lather, repeat, and keep doing that. And if we can do that as an IT team or even just as an overall BRM, you're winning. And folks won't need to call it anything fancy, and they probably won't even know what to call it. They'll just say, this person's really engaged. They listen to me. When I have a problem, they always seem to know who can solve it. Notice I didn't say I was solving it. Um, that's where you start to really kind of feel the impact. And then, like I said, it's enough to have a sponsor that gets you in the game.
Right.
But if you want to keep playing the game, and I'm sure plenty of people as I do that have had BRM programs where they weren't able to show that, they
Right.
didn't deliver,
Right.
and you have a leadership change, you have a loss of focus maybe on BRM. The next big thing comes up, and
Right.
someone's new idea is kind of first and foremost. I think you've got to make an impact. That you got to strike that iron while it's hot. You need to not take that support for granted.
Right.
That it's not just take your time. These things do take time. But to your point earlier, you talked about what are the short term things you can do as a BRM. What are those longer term things that you're going to help mature the organization
Right.
into doing? And then I think if you can present, a roadmap on behalf of your BRM team that shows those things,
Sure.
then it's really easy to keep the support of that CIO, COO, et cetera. So hopefully that answers your question, but it's kind of a loaded one. We could talk forever on this one.
Yeah, actually, brilliant. Thank you so much for this episode. I think we should continue on this on the next episode because there's a lot more packed information. I think, Tommy, we think that the whole audience would stand to gain benefits. So thank you so much for this episode, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode because the tempo is going up, and I don't want to stop here. We wanted to do another episode specifically around some of those successes, challenges, and how do we create value? Because that's the value is in the pudding, right? I mean, where do you do and how do we do that part? But thank you so much for your time today for this episode of BRM Brownbag. We will be shortly looking at the next episode where we go into much more towards the practicality of implementing BRM. And there's a lot of wisdom and nuggets that you have provided. Can't wait to see the next episode. But thank you so much, Tommy, for being today and sharing your valuable insights. And the passion just oozes out. I mean, that's what I see. But thank you so much for being in today.
You're so welcome, and I love what I do, and it really helps to have someone on the other side of this conversation that has the same amount of passion as I do. So thanks for your time today, and I look forward to talking more in the future.
Sure. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the session. We look forward to seeing you in our 35th episode, again with Tommy, and looking at other dimensions that we have not covered. So until that, keep watching and subscribing to the BRM Brownbag. We hope we can impact the single global BRM community. And what a way to do it, because we've just completed the BRM week and there's a lot more happening. And I hope you can join us for the future episodes. Thank you so much, everyone.